The El Niño Southern Oscillation, better known as ENSO, has always been one of the most powerful engines of Earth's climate. For centuries, its alternating warm El Niño and cool La Niña phases have shifted global rainfall, disrupted harvests, and driven hurricanes or droughts. In the United States, it is one of the hidden forces behind tornado outbreaks in the Great Plains, heat waves in the south, wildfires in California, and hurricanes striking the Gulf Coast. Yet now ENSO faces a new companion: human-driven climate change. The Pacific Ocean still pulses with its familiar rhythm of warming and cooling, but that rhythm is playing against a backdrop of rising global temperatures, melting ice, and intensifying extremes. The question is no longer whether ENSO will influence American life, it always has, but how global warming will amplify or alter its impacts. And the answers coming from climate scientists, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and US researchers are sobering. The future America faces is one where ENSO's cycles are sharper, more destructive, and less forgiving, demanding a level of preparation that the nation has only begun to embrace. One of the most pressing questions is whether global warming will make hurricanes worse, particularly when ENSO tilts into La Niña. Scientists know that La Niña tends to reduce wind shear in the Atlantic, allowing hurricanes to grow stronger. With climate change heating the oceans, the raw fuel for these storms, warm surface water, is becoming more abundant. Warmer seas mean more energy for rapid intensification, the terrifying process where a storm jumps from a Category 1 to a Category 4 in less than 24 hours. Recent hurricanes like Michael in 2018, Laura in 2020, Ida in 2021, and Ian in 2022 all showed how quickly storms can explode when conditions are favorable. In each case, La Niña phases helped clear the skies for development, and warmer oceans supercharged the outcome. The consensus among many researchers is that while climate change may not drastically increase the number of hurricanes, it will almost certainly increase their severity, rainfall, and potential for rapid intensification. This is particularly dangerous for US coastal communities, where evacuation orders depend on reliable forecasts. If storms can grow stronger in less than a day, the window for saving lives shrinks. Global warming, layered onto ENSO's natural cycles, is essentially loading the dice in favor of more catastrophic storms. The IPCC, in its latest assessment reports, has made clear that ENSO's future in a warming climate will be marked by more extremes. While there is still debate over whether El Niño events will become more frequent, there is growing evidence that the strongest El Niños and La Niñas are likely to occur more often. For the United States, this means sharper swings between floods and droughts, hotter heat waves, and heavier downpours. The IPCC highlights that rainfall extremes are already intensifying as a result of climate change. ENSO adds to this by redistributing where and when those rains fall. In El Niño years, parts of California and the south already face greater flood risks, while La Niña drives drought in the southwest and midwest. If climate change increases the intensity of rainfall events, those floods will be more destructive. If climate change makes dry conditions hotter and more prolonged, La Niña droughts will be more devastating. The combination is a recipe for volatility unlike anything in recorded history. For policymakers, the message from the IPCC is stark. Prepare for ENSO extremes that are no longer bounded by the past. Farmers are already on the front lines of this volatility. In Iowa, Illinois, and across the Midwest, crop yields depend on predictable rainfall and moderate heat. ENSO disrupts both, and climate change is making the disruptions harsher. In 2012, during a La Niña-influenced drought, US corn yields dropped to their lowest in nearly 2 decades, sending global grain prices soaring. In the future, such droughts may be hotter and longer, stressing crops beyond recovery. El Niño years, while sometimes wetter, can also delay planting or trigger floods that wash away seedlings. The IPCC warns that staple crops like corn, soybeans, and wheat are among the most vulnerable to ENSO climate change interactions. American farmers may face harvests that swing wildly from bumper crops to near-total failures. Adaptation will require investment in drought-resistant seed varieties, improved irrigation, and insurance systems that can absorb more frequent shocks. Without these measures, US agriculture, one of the pillars of the global food system, risks destabilization at the very moment when the world depends most on its exports. American cities, too, must brace for ENSO amplified by climate change. In the West, La Niña's dry phases already sharpen fire risk, turning forests into tinder. As global warming accelerates, snowpacks shrink and summer heat waves grow fiercer, those fires ignite more easily and burn longer. Smoke from California and Oregon wildfires now drifts across the country, degrading air quality in states thousands of miles away. Hospitals record spikes in asthma and respiratory illness during these smoky summers, adding a public health dimension to what was once considered only a wildfire problem. In El Niño years, urban flood risks rise, particularly in cities like Los Angeles, Houston, and New Orleans. Heavier rains overwhelm drainage systems, sending raw sewage into waterways and neighborhoods. The IPCC notes that the urban heat island effect magnifies climate extremes, making cities hotter during El Niño heat waves and more flood-prone during heavy downpours. The consequence is that ENSO cycles, once seasonal curiosities, are becoming critical factors in how American cities must design infrastructure, from stormwater systems to cooling centers. Families will feel these shifts most directly in their wallets and daily routines. ENSO already drives food and energy price fluctuations, and climate change is intensifying the swings. When La Niña pushes natural gas demand higher during cold winters, utilities struggle to meet needs, raising heating bills. When El Niño floods fields or droughts scorch them, grocery prices climb. Families on tight budgets will struggle most, particularly as inflation compounds the volatility. Health costs rise too, as heat waves, floods, and wildfires trigger medical emergencies. Parents face more missed school days for children during flu seasons linked to ENSO, or from smoke-filled skies that keep kids indoors. Communities living near coasts or in floodplains face higher insurance premiums, or find themselves unable to buy coverage at all. What was once an occasional hardship linked to ENSO may soon be an annual trial as climate change stretches its impacts further into everyday life. One of the challenges in preparing for this volatile future is psychological. Many Americans still think of climate disasters as rare or isolated. ENSO complicates this by clustering extremes, hotter summers, stronger hurricanes, harsher droughts, into cycles that return every few years. With climate change making those cycles sharper, the perception of safety may erode. A family that survives one hurricane may face another, even stronger, just a few years later. A farmer who rebuilds after one drought may lose everything again in the next La Niña. Without clear public education, the tendency is to treat each disaster as unrelated, rather than as part of a predictable climate pattern. Awareness, as the closing call reminds us, saves both lives and money. Recognizing ENSO's role in shaping these disasters, and climate change's role in intensifying them, can shift communities from reaction to preparation. The federal government is beginning to take this seriously. Agencies like NOAA and NASA are investing in better ENSO forecasting, incorporating climate change scenarios into their models. The IPCC emphasizes the need for nations to integrate seasonal forecasts into long-term planning, and the United States is slowly moving in that direction. FEMA now pre-positions disaster supplies based on ENSO outlooks, while the Department of Agriculture adjusts crop insurance payouts with ENSO forecasts in mind. Yet gaps remain. Many cities and rural communities lack the resources to adapt, leaving them highly vulnerable. Investments in climate-resilient infrastructure, such as seawalls, upgraded power grids, and expanded water storage, lag behind the pace of change. Public health systems, stretched thin by COVID-19, may struggle to cope with ENSO-driven disease outbreaks or heat waves. Closing these gaps requires political will and public demand, fueled by a recognition that ENSO is not a distant phenomenon, but a present and worsening threat. For America's future, the convergence of ENSO and climate change will likely mean more extremes across every sector: weather, health, economy, and security. Hurricanes will strike harder, wildfires will burn longer, floods will surge higher, and droughts will last longer. The IPCC's insights are unambiguous. Climate change is amplifying variability, and ENSO is the amplifier's hand on the dial. Preparing for this future requires rethinking how we live with water, heat, and storms. It requires that farmers embrace new technologies, cities rebuild with resilience in mind, and families plan for emergencies not once in a lifetime, but once every few years. The closing call is urgent. Awareness saves lives and money. Every dollar spent on preparation, upgrading levees, reinforcing power lines, stockpiling medical supplies, returns many times over by preventing losses. Every life protected by better forecasting and public education is a victory against forces we cannot control, but can anticipate. ENSO will continue to pulse across the Pacific, and climate change will continue to amplify its impacts. But whether those impacts are catastrophic or manageable depends on the choices America makes now. The future is not written in the waves of the Pacific. It is written in how we respond to them. The intersection of ENSO and climate change is not theoretical. It is already unfolding in ways scientists can measure. Global warming is heating the oceans, and since ENSO is fundamentally an ocean atmosphere phenomenon, the baseline from which it operates is shifting. Average sea surface temperatures in the tropical Pacific have risen, meaning that when El Niño events occur, the warming stacks on top of an already warmer ocean. The result is more powerful surges of energy into the atmosphere, intensifying rainfall and altering global storm tracks. Conversely, La Niña events now begin from a warmer background state, so even though they represent cooling, they still often register higher temperatures than La Niñas of past decades. For the United States, this altered baseline means the familiar patterns of ENSO, California floods in El Niño years, drought in the southwest during La Niña, hurricane booms in the Atlantic, are playing out with more destructive force. What once might have been heavy rains now become record-breaking floods. What once was a dry spell now turns into a multi-year megadrought. One of the clearest signals of this amplification is found in hurricanes. Historically, ENSO phases have been reliable predictors of hurricane activity. El Niño tends to suppress Atlantic hurricanes by increasing wind shear, while La Niña removes that barrier, encouraging more storms. But as the IPCC and NOAA have noted, climate change is shifting this balance. Even in El Niño years, when Atlantic hurricane activity should be reduced, warmer seas can still produce strong storms. In La Niña years, the combination of low wind shear and overheated oceans becomes particularly dangerous, leading to hyperactive hurricane seasons like 2020, when a record 30 named storms formed. Scientists caution that while the total number of hurricanes may not rise dramatically, the intensity and destructiveness almost certainly will. Rapid intensification, the process by which storms strengthen explosively just before landfall, is becoming more common. Families along the Gulf Coast and eastern seaboard face shorter preparation windows and higher risks of catastrophic damage, and insurers struggle to price that risk into premiums. Flooding is another area where ENSO and climate change collide. In El Niño years, storm tracks tend to shift southward, funneling moisture into California and the southern US. Historically, this has brought welcome relief to drought-stricken regions. But now, with a warmer atmosphere able to hold more moisture, those storms are producing record-breaking rainfall. The 2017 to 2019 atmospheric river storms that battered California, flooding rivers and triggering landslides, were partly ENSO-related and intensified by climate warming. Infrastructure built decades ago is increasingly unable to handle the volume, leaving cities vulnerable to catastrophic floods. Meanwhile, La Niña-driven droughts in the Midwest and West have deepened into crises. Reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell reached historic lows during the recent prolonged La Niña, threatening water supplies for tens of millions. The IPCC emphasizes that such droughts are likely to grow longer and hotter, straining agriculture, water management, and power generation. The fire-hurricane contrast is another ENSO signal now heightened by climate change. In La Niña years, the West dries out, and wildfires ignite across California, Oregon, and Colorado. Rising global temperatures mean that snowpacks melt earlier, soils dry out faster, and forests become tinderboxes for longer stretches of the year. At the same time, the Atlantic hurricane basin roars to life under La Niña conditions, pummeling states from Texas to Florida with more frequent and severe storms. The United States, therefore, faces a dual hazard. While one region is choking under wildfire smoke, another is reeling from hurricane flooding and wind damage. This split screen of disaster is becoming a hallmark of the 21st century. Families across the country are forced to live with a constant cycle of alerts, evacuations, and rebuilding, all while national resources are stretched thin, responding to simultaneous crises. The IPCC's insights make it clear that variability itself is increasing. It is not simply that floods are worse or droughts are deeper, it is that swings between them are faster and less predictable. A farmer in Iowa might experience drought one year, floods the next, and scorching heat the year after. Such volatility undermines planning, reduces economic stability, and increases stress on families. For cities, it means upgrading drainage systems and cooling centres only to see them tested by different extremes within a few years. For energy systems, it means alternating between strain from high heating demand in cold La Niña winters and strain from high cooling demand in hot El Niño summers. For families, it means never knowing whether the next ENSO cycle will bring relief or catastrophe, only that it will bring some form of disruption. Preparation is now essential. The United States has tools, forecasting systems, disaster response agencies, insurance programs, but many are designed for the 20th century climate, not the 21st. Forecasts from NOAA can warn of ENSO months in advance, yet without investments in infrastructure, those forecasts cannot prevent damage. Farmers can insure their crops, but repeated failures may drive smaller farms out of business. Families can buy air conditioners or generators, but only if they can afford them, highlighting how climate volatility widens inequality. Awareness campaigns, such as explaining how ENSO works and why it matters, are critical. Without public understanding, forecasts risk being ignored and life-saving preparation is missed. As climate change amplifies ENSO, the challenge is no longer whether we can see the future coming. It is whether we act on that knowledge. One of the underappreciated consequences of ENSO in a warming climate is its impact on public health and community resilience. Heat waves during El Niño summers grow more severe, straining hospitals with cases of dehydration and heat stroke. During La Niña winters, harsher cold snaps in northern states drive up energy demand, leaving low-income families struggling to afford heating. Mosquito-borne illnesses spread faster when heavy El Niño rains create standing water, while La Niña droughts degrade air quality with dust and wildfire smoke. These are not isolated health problems. They are systemic challenges that touch millions of Americans. And because climate change heightens both the intensity and duration of ENSO's swings, the public health burden will increase. Hospitals, schools, and emergency services will have to plan not just for single events, but for recurring cycles that arrive with greater volatility. Families, too, will face difficult choices, from affording insurance in hurricane-prone states to managing water shortages in drought-stricken regions. ENSO's marriage with climate change ensures that extremes will no longer be rare but recurring, pressing communities to adapt faster than ever. The economic toll will also deepen. The IPCC warns that climate-amplified ENSO events could cost billions annually in damages and lost productivity. Hurricanes that grow stronger on a warmed Atlantic threaten refineries, ports, and supply chains. Droughts in the Midwest reduce corn and soybean yields, pushing up food prices worldwide. Floods overwhelm infrastructure, leaving taxpayers to foot the bill for repairs. Insurance markets already strained by disasters may collapse in certain regions, leaving homeowners without affordable coverage. This financial instability spreads into national politics, as demands for federal aid grow after every disaster. Wall Street and Washington track ENSO closely because it dictates the rhythm of risk, but ordinary families experience its impacts more intimately through grocery bills, energy costs, and property values. Awareness is not optional, it is survival. Yet despite the challenges, forecasting skill and adaptation strategies offer a path forward. NOAA, NASA, and global climate centers now provide months of advance warning when ENSO conditions are forming. AI-driven models and supercomputers are breaking down long-standing barriers to prediction, offering communities time to prepare. What remains is the societal choice to act on that knowledge. Cities must strengthen levees, expand wildfire defenses, and invest in resilient power grids. Farmers must adopt climate-smart practices and diversify crops. Families must embrace preparedness, keeping emergency kits, following evacuation orders, and understanding the risks tied to each ENSO phase. Every dollar spent on preparation saves many times more in recovery. Every action taken before disaster strikes saves lives. The conclusion is clear. ENSO in the age of climate change is a force multiplier, turning ordinary weather risks into extraordinary challenges. America cannot stop El Niño or La Niña, but it can reduce their toll by recognizing their power and preparing accordingly. Climate change has tilted the scales toward more extremes, but awareness and preparation can tilt them back toward resilience. The choice lies not in the Pacific Ocean, but in the decisions made by communities, leaders, and families. If you want to understand how cycles like ENSO and global warming shape the storms, fires, and floods of tomorrow, and what they mean for your family, your city, and your future, subscribe to Crisis Lens. Together, we'll uncover the science, the stakes, and the strategies that can save both lives and money in America's volatile climate future.